Welcome to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and joining me tonight is Denise Woods. She is the founding Directora of the Food Justice DMV. It's an organization that is trying to meet very desperately the needs of communities in the district, Maryland, and Virginia. Thank you so much, Denise, for being here with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we were introduced by a mutual friend. I can't let this go without thanking Joanne Walton, who has introduced me to so many organizations and people over the years because she is very actively involved in so much community work around the Northern Virginia area. So she introduced us and said, "You must talk with Denise." And I'd not heard of your organization, and I'm sure my viewers get tired of hearing me say this over and over again. Like, I don't know how I didn't know you already because looking at your list of community partners, I work with some of your community partners. So that in of itself was like discovering somebody I should have known, and now we know each other. But I would like, for the benefit of our viewers, to really talk for you to tell us what the founding story is of Food Justice DMV.
Well, it was an arrow in my heart when it happened. I was accompanying Oscar to an ICE check-in, which he had to go to or be deported. And during our 7-hour journey, he told me that one time he had to pay for a cab for himself or be deported. He paid $150. And when he came back home, he had to tell his 8-year-old daughter, Isa, why they had no food. I heard this story, and who could forget it? When the pandemic struck and laid bare the structural inequalities about who gets to eat, I remembered him, and I contacted him and found out that he was running out of food. Not only that, Claribel, who I had been accompanying as well, who had a 1-year-old and ICE was threatening to deport on her due date, was also running out of food. At that moment, we pivoted quickly from accompaniment and transferred our number into food distribution. We imagined supporting 200 families that we had been accompanying to ICE check-ins. Well, within days, my phone was exploding with parents pleading for food for their children. It was given out in grocery stores, put on the radio, put on Facebook. I've never been so popular. It was terrifying at the same time because we were set up for 200. What would we do? We began to fly the plane without the wings. I had never done food distribution, but it was essential because these families had no other way to get food. Overnight, the pandemic had ripped away every support they had. No food, no work, no money, no governmental support. All of the families are undocumented, so they are not allowed to work. So there isn't options. You can't call up some government service and say, well, if that doesn't work, this one will work. Not only that, they don't speak English. So imagine entering a new country, and many of them are new to this country, not understanding anything about how systems operate, much less the websites might be in English. And so we had to get to work, and work we did. We went from delivering to 200 to now we support 6,350 families throughout the DMV.
That is amazing, those numbers. And
Yeah.
you know, so I'm a Rotarian, and in my Rotary Club is
Oh,
Jerry Foltz, and he and Alice are founders of the Centerville Immigration Forum. And so we support the Centerville Labor Resource Center. And again, we are very familiar with the challenges that people have in communities. Some of them are undocumented, some of them are documented but have family members who are undocumented. And it is very difficult to make sure that basic needs are being met for these people who live and work in our communities. And you're right, COVID hit, and when you can't actually go out and work in person, which a lot of people were doing in-person jobs, it could not be done remotely. Then all of a sudden, where are the safety net programs? And there aren't any, as you point out. But it seems to me your superpower is community organizing. So tell us, I looked at your website at these amazing volunteers. You've got like 200 volunteers that are doing deliveries, and then you've got like 50 volunteers who keep the wheels on the bus turning. So how did your team pivot?
well, I love that you point out the extraordinary powers of our volunteers because this could not be done without the 275 volunteers who throw it down for food justice for immigrant families. There's a leadership circle. There's those who do interpretation because our whole infrastructure is in Spanish. So when someone contacts us who speaks English, we almost don't know what to do. And we never say no. We are, by whatever means necessary, organization. Someone calls up with a medical issue, we'll connect them to that volunteer who specializes in medical issues. When vaccinations were needed, one of our volunteers began to specialize in vaccinations and did 1,000 vaccinations in different clinics. Each volunteer is a critical component of this organization, but we center Latino voices because as a white woman, I'm very aware of the privilege and power I have in the society. So I always do my best to center those most impacted by the decisions because they know what's best for their lives, not me. And so half of our leadership circle is Latinx, and many of our volunteers are, as well as we have 19 powerful community leaders who are Latinx, Haitian, and Nigerian. And they deliver these 19 people to 2,200 families a month. They go there, they pick up the food from us, and then they go forth and deliver to their community. So they are incredibly powerful. I sit in awe of the people who do the work for their communities because they don't stop. They do
Well,
not stop.
we point out something important, which is the role of a leader is to really help to bring out the best in what people have to offer. And it sounds like your leadership team feels like that they're empowered within their communities. They must feel like they've got their superhero cape on. But I think that comes from you too, in believing that if it must be done, a way will be found to do it. And that is what leadership is. And so my hat is off to you for making these folks feel that these needs will be met one way or another. You'll figure it out, and you have figured it out. And so one of the things I'm going to point out too is that in addition to food, there are things like sanitary supplies, diapers is huge, and also formula. And we are in the middle of a formula crisis in this country. And there are families trying to find formula, and some families trying to find very specific formula. And what has this challenge meant for your organization?
Well, we have pretty much not stopped scouring shelves while holding the tension that we cannot hoard it for ourselves because some of the families we support may be going to these same stores. Other community members may need them. So it's a real hard tension to hold between knowing that the families we support need it. And we have one woman who contacted us. She had a 4-month-old. No, actually, I'm sorry, 2-month-old. And she couldn't find the infant formula she needed. And so one of our amazing volunteers who specializes in Reston, in fact, went online and was able to, well, she scoured it and couldn't find it. And then she did some more. And then she was able to find it and bring it to her the next day. And so that's the kind of work we get done. The woman she had no phone because ICE wouldn't let her use the phone they gave her to check in every week. And she ran out of what the hospital had given her. And so this was a critical time. The baby was tiny.
Well, and I want to point something else out since your organization is food justice and what that means. The fact that, access to food is a basic human right that should not be denied anyone.
Absolutely.
For lack of resources or funds. But when it comes to breastfeeding mothers, man, has this been an aha moment for the nation, including many of the men who make public policy around breastfeeding and not understanding anything about how women's bodies work at all, or apparently how the economy works at all. So moms who work 2 and 3 low-paying part-time jobs with no paid maternity or parental leave, how are they supposed to breastfeed? I would love to know. And so I can't believe the amount of criticism that has really poured out of people who should not be opening their mouths and talking about things of which they have zero knowledge. I mean, it infuriates me. I don't know how you feel about it, but these parents looking for formula are people who have gone back to work when their children are very young, and they are working hard to put food on the table and a roof over their head. For anyone to be criticizing mothers who don't breastfeed.
You're singing my song We have been very clear that we can never say breast is best because we can never judge or tell anyone what to do with their body, first of all, and that people do it not because they want to necessarily, though they might. It's up to them, but it's mainly because they have to. As you said, most of them are working right away. They do not have the capacity to pump breast milk into bottles. And so while we could say, you'll save money and all these things, that the reality of their lives means that's a very different equation for them.
It's also interesting because there was a story online about a woman who has a corporate job who is breastfeeding and had to travel for her job, and how TSA stopped her
Yeah,
and wanted her to throw out her melted ice packs for her breast milk. And I'm thinking,
yeah,
you just cannot win. No
no,
matter what you do or who you are, if you are a woman, if you are a mom, if you're trying to work, the system is not working with you. And a whole bunch of people make rules who really should not have an opinion if they don't understand what they're talking about. But I wanted to raise that up because that, and diapers is the other one, is that, disposable diapers are something that working parents have to have. And I think your estimate is $12 a week. And a lot of that depends on the age of the child too, as to how many diapers they go through. But that is an enormous weekly, monthly, annual expense for parents.
it's a massive expenditure. And so we have always prioritized diapers because we received requests for diapers from a woman who had no money for them. So she was using rags. And then she didn't have any money to buy laundry soap to clean the rags. And so then we realized how much this was bigger than food. This is way back in the beginning of the organization. And that's when we took on getting women sanitary pads and diapers and masks as the critical essential items. We get requests for toothpaste, toothbrushes and soap. Like, we are talking about the most basic human needs that we're trying to meet here. And it just speaks to the vast need that the families have on an ongoing basis.
It certainly does. And you can't, I think of Maslow's hierarchy. People can't be successful in their communities unless you meet the lowest level, which is food,
Right.
housing, safety, security, diapers, toothpaste. So when you look around your community and you're like, well, people should just pull themselves up by their bootstraps, another kind of ridiculous American mythology that I reject. The fact of the matter is, we are a land of plenty. We are one of the richest nations on the earth, and no one in this country should go without. And to me, that is a matter of justice, and it's a matter of the moral choice. We're going to go to a quick break. Stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to talk further with Denise Woods of Food Justice DMV.
Caitlin, be serious. Now take the oath. Come on. I'm totally taking this seriously. Okay, I'm ready. You may begin. I pledge that I will never meet in person with anyone I first met online without checking with my parent or guardian. And furthermore, if my parent or guardian agrees to the meeting, it will be in a public place and my parent or guardian must come along. Do you pinky swear? I do.
When you teach your kids about internet safety, they'll pass it on. For more information, go to cableclicksmart.org.
Do you love sports? Then you should know about STEM. Because maximizing nutrition, analyzing peak muscle performance, calculating the perfect shot, and more are all made possible by science, technology, engineering, and math. In fact, there are more careers than ever in sports science. So if you have a passion for sports, then think about getting involved in STEM and improve everyone's game on and off the field. Get inspired at shecanstem.com.
I'm a first-generation Filipino American. You don't always feel you're a part of the country you live in. It's this weird middle space sometimes that you have to live inside of. But when you meet others that are also living in that space, you'll learn to know that it's its own unique space too.
Welcome back to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and joining me tonight is Denise Woods. She is the founding Directora of Food Justice DMV, and she serves communities that are marginalized, that do not have access to other kinds of safety net programs for basic things like food, diapers, and what is required to keep a family fed and safe. So, Denise, I want to hear more about your wonderful volunteers. You referenced that you had you had 275 volunteers, and I know that you initially ran a transportation program and you pivoted to food delivery. So, how have these additional volunteers found you, or how have you found them? How are you connecting with your volunteer network?
I think most of all, it's through word of mouth, and people who become volunteers all of a sudden get the Kool-Aid and begin to tell everyone they know about it. So a lot of people know someone. It also happens through, we belong to different food equity councils. So we send out announcements for we need volunteers to deliver food. Our Tuesday and Saturday distributions both are delivery models, which are significant because only 4% of mutual aid, food justice, food organizations actually deliver. And we provide a critical need because many women cannot leave their homes because they have maybe have 3 small children, they may be homebound, they don't have the money to actually pay for transportation or gas right now. And so it's a critical need. We have multiple partnerships with organizations that support people who are medically ill, who cannot leave. And so we are
Wow.
continually, yes. And in addition, any volunteer can join us, even though we travel in the lingua franca of Espanol. I'm already mixing it up. Um, Most people are willing to speak Google Translate, and very few people have any issues with it. We also have vulture interpreters for anyone who has an issue with using Google Translate. So we make sure everyone is able to join it. We don't charge anyone for their free Spanish classes, by the way, nor the upper body workout, because you should see our volunteers. This is not glamorous work. It is sweaty, hard work, but people love the bodybuilding opportunity because we're lifting 50-pound bags of beans and rice and oil and maseca, huge pallets of vegetables and fruit. Today we had a pallet of corn and tomatoes, and it was gorgeous, like a big picnic that they were distributing.
So where does your food come from? So where do the pallets of food and how do your volunteers get the food, and how is it organized? Because I know you've got regular distribution days in different locations.
Well, we could talk the rest of the time about this. Each distribution is nuanced, dynamic, and has its own complexities. On Thursday, for example, which is our largest and the community leader run distribution, where we center Black and Brown community leaders who are Nigerian, Haitian, and Latino, we receive the food from 2 organizations. One is So What Else, and they provide us with reclaimed food and diapers, as well as Compassion and Passion, and they provide us with reclaimed food and produce as well. And then as needed, we have to buy it. That is our most expensive distribution. Because of inflation, prices have increased by 43% for our central mainstays. We only provide culturally appropriate vegetarian food that supports the community we serve. We do beans, rice, oil, maseca, which is very unusual. And all these products at Maseca have gone up a average of 43%. It now costs $10,000 to do one Thursday distribution when we distribute, yes, beans, rice, oil, and Maseca to 1,100 people on Thursdays. So to say we need money is an understatement, even though at the same time we've raised $915,000.
Wow, you're getting so close to $1 million.
We
You're
are
getting
this close, and it's
so close.
extraordinary to be here. Yet the need continues. Just right now, we only have $8,000 in the bank because we have 18,000 in reimbursements, and we are now supporting the immigrants who have been bussed in from Texas, courtesy of the racist coattails of Abbott. So we now have, for example, just 2 days ago, we got a request for 43 deliveries. There were 3 groups of migrants bussed in from Tejas living in 3 Airbnbs, 20 in one, 12 in another, 10 in another. And we got it done. And that was on top of our regular distributions to the 6,350 families that we support.
I mean, I'm astonished, and yet I shouldn't be, because I believe in the power of community organizing. I believe in the generosity of human beings. I think COVID has really shown us what we are all capable of doing to pitch in and help out our neighbors. But the people you're helping are often unseen. They're invisible in many of the communities the rest of us live in the suburbs. So without organizations like yours, we wouldn't know where to find them. We wouldn't know the situation that they're in. So the fact that you have been able, by word of mouth, to find volunteers, and you have been able to serve communities like that, like boom, snap your fingers and 43 families need to be fed today, is a testament to the goodwill and the good hearts and the generous nature of people here in the DMV area. And I would encourage our viewers to think about that too. I mean, the food that you're distributing is is basic food. I mean, it's not a 4-star Michelin rated meal that these folks are getting. But diapers and formula and beans and rice keep people going.
And
And
produce. I want to say we center produce because we have a health equity model that we assign to our food distribution, as well as an eco lens, because produce is critical to people's health. And they've shown there's huge racial health disparities due to people living in food deserts, due to people not having enough food or not having access to stores that provide healthy food. And so we see it as critical to our mission to provide produce every time we do a distribution. And we also only use used bags for our distribution of food and produce as a way of supporting the planet. We do not ever buy a plastic bag or brown paper bag, or do our best not to, as well as we use as much reclaimed produce, and also try to reduce our single use of plastic, because a good portion of the migrants, who, by the way, have the human right to escape for their lives. They have the human right to protect their family. The stories we hear of the families that we support would make many of them are terrifying. And just recently, this is really hard to hear. Somehow, a family that arrived here 6 months ago got my number from someone on the street. He had been, it's really hard to say, and it's a trigger warning. He was shot 6 times by a gang escaping El Salvador, and was living in a car with his family with 3 young children from 3 to 11 years old. His kidneys were in failure. And I'm telling this you because they gave me permission. We never share anyone's story without their permission. But it's the stories like this that are really so heart-rending, and knowing that they are completely cut off from any systems that support them. They do not have other numbers to call. Like, I'm a random stranger who ended up partnering with Sanctuary DMV to raise money for them so they could get into a hotel room, right? And so we also got the medical appointments, and now they're surrounded by a community that supports them. But it really is so challenging. We support Rosa Franco, who won Woman of the Year in Guatemala this year, because she fought for 20 years for her daughter's justice, because she was murdered by a drug kingpin 20 years ago. Not only did she put the drug kingpin behind bars while having to have bodyguards, she also was instrumental in starting a law in Guatemala. So now that if a girl or a woman disappears, the government has to act within 6 hours.
wow.
Yes, and she was instrumental in getting that law passed. Not only that, she's part of our activist pipeline. People we support are given opportunities to participate in their own liberation. So we give them educational and advocacy opportunities to go and protest for citizenship, to go and protest for advocate to end Title 42, because they are the ones who can create their own legacy.
And I think that's so important too. I often feel like I sat for 9 years on the board of Bright Paths, and we provided crisis intervention for food and keeping the lights on and paying utility bills, and in addition to a lot of other services like financial mentoring. But advocacy work, to me, is something that is so important for every nonprofit to do, because if you can't change policies, you're just putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. And the people who should be allowed to advocate are the people that you're serving. To me, supporting people to advocate on their own behalf is the greatest service that a nonprofit can give to the communities that they serve, standing alongside them while they
Absolutely.
advocate and tell their stories. But the people coming here, and you know, I try to say as often as possible, we are all members of the human race. We're all members of the human race. I don't get to decide who should live in terrible conditions or who shouldn't cross the border in order to save their lives or the lives of their children. That's not for me to decide. And I would hope that people's sense of what is just, right, and fair, and what is part of supporting other human beings to have just basic life, is a message that people take away from this show and will reach out to you. And as you said, Google Translate is our friend. Don't be, I don't want people thinking, well, I don't speak Spanish. For goodness me, I'm an American. I speak one language, English. That's what it means to be an American. We're monolingual. But the fact of the matter is, if you want to volunteer, there's a place and there are ways. And I hope, Denise, that, your volunteer base continues to grow so that you can serve more people. So thank you so much for being with us, Denise, on the show. And I want to encourage everyone who is watching the show, if you want to get involved, they do have a website. They have a Twitter account. They have a Facebook page in both Spanish and in English. And there are many ways for you to volunteer. And also think about collaborative partnerships. One of the things Denise and I talked about is the fact that she works with She Believes in Me, which is out in Herndon. I do deliveries from BRAS, bringing resources and aids to women's shelters in Vienna out to Herndon, and also about reusing bags. That's one of the things I always put aside my bags, both plastic and paper. And every time I do a delivery out to Herndon, I take all those bags and I drop them off because they will reuse them to distribute food and supplies to people in the community. So that's just something, if you're not sure what to do with all those accumulating bags, reach out to Denise and any number of other nonprofits that do food distribution. That is one way of being environmentally sustainable and making sure that we're keeping track of what we're producing and how to reclaim and reuse it, which is something else Denise pointed out, is reclaim, repurpose, and reuse. So thank you so much again, Denise, for being with us on Your Need to Know. For anyone who's looking for past Your Need to Know shows, you can find them on Inside Scoop C on YouTube. Just go out to YouTube. There you go. It's on the screen for past shows. Thank you so much. And this is what you need to know.